Ciao, welcome to Beatspot. I'm Marco, and in this video I want to talk about latency. And everything started from a reel which I messed up about latency that I'm going to show you. This is the reel, and in this reel I say that some plugins introduce latency, which is correct, and that you have two options to fix it. And one is to don't use them at all, and the other one is to use the track delay to compensate for the latency, and that's bullshit. I messed up. So Kashmir made me notice that by saying that's not audible latency, the kick is still playing on time. The latency is happening in the LFO tools detection only. So basically I messed up for two reasons. The kick was still playing in time, but it was different, and it was due to the isotope neutron crossfade kind of filters that I set, and also for the latency that was happening in the volume shaper plugin, and it was cutting the tail of the kick drum in a different way. So the kick drum was actually different, but the reason is another. So let's dive into it. So I was trying to work with a neutron multiband transient shaper with kind of a crossfade here, and so this is the sound. And you can see there's some latency. If I turn off the plugin, there's no difference. And if I completely delete the plugin, you can see the kick is in time. But this latency is making the kick a bit delayed, and it's being cut a bit earlier. So that's the problem. So I have this latency test thing just to kind of accentuate the effect, and you can see what's happening. So in my actual example, the problem was marginal, but it was cutting away a couple more cycles of the kick drum, making it feel a bit less full. And that's the problem that happens with these kind of plugins. So plugins that are dependent on the host tempo that are synced with the grid have this kind of problem with latency. So they kind of detect the latency and they have the sound being processed into them kind of delayed, while all the rest of the plugins don't have this kind of problem. So for example, if I had some sort of delay here in the transient master, the latency will be compensated right after it and right before any other kind of processing that's being applied later in the chain. So why do you want to know this thing? And there are two reasons. First is you don't make a mistake as mine, so you don't get the tail of your sounds being chopped off too early. And also you have more accurate sidechain if you're using sidechain with this kind of plugins like LFO tool, cable guys volume shaper, and any other sort of plugins. There's also looperator that kind of depends on that host tempo. There's also Melda Audio, Emerytmizer, and Effectrix, many more. So the solution to this problem is like of just dealing with it and making a delayed curve, so you have this kind of cut. And it's kind of cutting later, but also the kick is happening later inside that plugin. But the good news is that the kick is still in time and it's being compensated right after the shaper box. You don't have really that kind of problem. The problem stands only within that plugin. Another doubt that you might have is that the signal is being delayed also for sidechain compression if you're using an actual compressor that's detecting the peak. If you select as an input that plugin or anything before or anything later, there's no problem. The DAW is still compensating the latency and everything is in time. So this is it for this video. Hope it will clear up some doubts you might have, and see you in the next one.